Alright guys, so welcome to the stream. I'm going to be building a workstation today. It's a AEC workstation, so architecture, engineering, construction. Focus is on core clock speed, RAM, NVMe drive. So just doing some final setup and we'll be going live with the cameras. Alright, we are ready to rock and roll. Alright guys, so today we're building a workstation as mentioned. This is a 9900k, 64 gigabytes of RAM, 1 terabyte, Samsung 970 Evo Plus NVMe drive. We got the Gigabyte Z390 Designaire motherboard, which is pretty awesome. The new Evga G5 850 watt. And we went with a 2070 Super. So I'm just gonna run down the list and kind of just hey, what's up, Rob? How you doing, man? I'm gonna kind of just run down and explain what goes on when I do a computer build. I haven't done a stream in about 10 months. I think the last one was in December, so hopefully everything's looking good. Trying a new layout out. That's a little redundant. Let's see. Let me lock my cameras. I forgot to lock out the autofocus. So don't want to make you guys dizzy. Autofocus, where are you? Okay, lock that out. We're gonna, I think brightness and everything looks good, so we'll leave those alone. Ooh. The funny thing is, I was setting all these cameras up and everything last night, and it just never fails. There's always something you remember. Just get all this stuff knocked out. Configure video, camera control, lock out the autofocus, and we are good to go. Cool. I think the camera, let's see. We're doing it, and we're doing it live. Alright, lock all this good stuff out so nothing moves. Alright guys, so I'm going to go run down my basic process. The first thing I always do, I'm cheating a little bit because I've already unboxed this case and I've started taking it apart, and that was the point when I decided, you know, let's just do this live. So basically, first things first is I strip down the chassis, and we're almost there, but I remove the panels, all the panels, filters, fans. Even though we're upgrading the front fans and literally the rear fan will get used, we're going to remove them all just so we have plenty of working space. And because I'm familiar with this layout, we'll probably pre-wire some of these. It depends on my mood. Sometimes I'll pre-wire the chassis harness without the motherboard, and that tends to be my preference. I'm not sure which camera will catch my face. I think I'm chopped out, but that's okay. My preference is usually to pre-wire. I may not even cinch them down all the way, but you'll see me kind of route them in and just zip tie loosely. And that's just because there's so much more space. I can cheat and go through the chassis. So I'm probably gonna mute while I use my power tool. We're gonna disconnect. We're gonna take the fans out, and then there's a panel I gotta take off, and I'll mute while that happens. Alright. If the drill doesn't sound very loud, the impact doesn't sound loud, let me know, guys. Otherwise I'll keep muting in between. Basically we removed the fans. I just removed this hard drive cover. It's like a beauty cover because there's a 360mm radiator that will go in front here, and we just need to take that out for clearance. Now there's a hard drive cage that's still in place, which we will remove next. One nice thing about Vegas is that now it is cooling down, and it's so hot out here that it kind of sucks to stream in the summer. The office gets so warm that even if I set the thermostat down. It's usually 2 to 4 degrees warmer than the other room. So it's nice now that we're in like the 70s and 80s. Went back to California recently for my brother's wedding, and before moving to Vegas, we lived in Huntington Beach, which we were like a mile from the pier, so literally right next to the water. And I never noticed the humidity until I left. Now when I go back, it's like, whoa, it's so humid. Alright, thanks, Rob. I'll just keep it going then. I won't pause to mute. We're gonna move our power supply bracket off to the side over here. So at this point, I'll just start to pre-wire. We got all the important stuff disconnected. Still making fine adjustments to my process for speed on these, like speed in manufacturing. So we're just, we might try something different this time. But we're just routing cables at this point. This is the front panel USB 3.0. These over here are, these camera angles are alright. Yeah, so that's the, okay, cool. Just trying to see which camera's which. Maybe. Sorry guys if that's tripping anybody out. So these are the front I/O harness, and then we have our audio. I'm just gonna, let's try to see. I'm trying to make this user friendly so you guys can see. So we're just gonna get a zip tie in on the audio cable. It says front panel audio. Now I always recommend, even though there's front panel audio, I always recommend to plug into the back. These motherboards actually nowadays have pretty good audio, and you'll just get the best experience out the back. What's cool about the Gigabyte board, if you're using an external DAC, like, you know, Gigabyte actually has some USB ports that can supply more amperage than 3.0 spec to power like more higher powered amp or DACs, which I'm not an audiophile, but that's what all the cool audiophile guys do. They run DACs. No need for upgraded sound cards. Oh hey, Robin, right? How you doing, man? Got some RFO guys in here, it seems. Your RFO run on 2020 is pretty good, man. I think you were at 84 seconds, 85 seconds. Thanks, man. This one was posted on Twitter, if you saw it. It's in the Fractal Design Meshify C chassis. And we're doing a 360mm liquid cooler up front with Be Quiet fans. So we upgraded the fans. They're the 2200 RPM silent wings. I really like going Noctua, but the brown on a case with a window is a little bit of a bummer. Alright, so we're just feeding cables. This bottom one is probably the only one I'll have tight right now at this moment. And then I'll leave that one loose. This will get looped around like so, but I won't zip tie this last one until we're closer to completion. So chassis prep is basically done. We're gonna move on to the motherboard. And typically on larger orders, I might do all the chassis all at once so I could really get in a rhythm. But just trying to do some streams. Man, yeah, I've noticed 2020 is faster than 2019, it seems. I'm not sure if it's just me. I've only run the benchmark, but Aaron Maller has noticed that he says it feels a little snappier. Perhaps. I think you were like a second faster than the one I posted, and I think I did an 85. Yeah, my simplified test was 86, and then I always blank out the longer one was 85. It might have been 85 because like something cached or something. This overclock I'm gonna do is gonna be about 100 megahertz more aggressive, since that was an air-cooled build that I ran the benchmark on. So we're gonna tweak some of the settings around a little bit in the BIOS and squeeze out more performance, and go from there. I'm gonna run down some of the things I really like about this motherboard, guys. Sorry about all that crackling. So typically I like going ASUS. For heavy overclocking, I usually only go ASUS, but so like a lot of the BIMBox units were ASUS, just because it gave me more voltage, like really fine voltage control. My workstations are overclocked, but I prefer to call them tuned because they're not as aggressive. So I found Gigabyte to be the best balance for what I needed. And some of the advantages I feel that Gigabyte offers is this is a more expensive motherboard that I was using in the past, but the RAM slots are all metal and reinforced. All the PCIe slots are as well. I personally removed the M.2 heatsink. You know, they call them heatsinks, but they're just a block of metal. So when I've tested, they only help with like immediate bursts. Sustained loads, they ended up being the same temperature unless you have active cooling, and at the end of the day I remove them because IT or users, they wouldn't know which slot their M.2 is plugged into. So these come off. I like how there's the steel reinforced RAM slots, which isn't usually normal. And for guys that wonder, if you know, this is all motherboards, but we have 3 16x slots electrically. Only the top one is a full 16x bandwidth, and if we plug anything into the second one, 1, 2, this is technically slot 3, but this is the second 16x. This is an 8x slot. It'll run the top one at 8x, the bottom one at 8x. This bottom one, if I recall, is going through the chipset, so you don't really want to run. There's not a whole lot you could run on. I think this is 4x, and these are 1x. There's not too much you could run off of this. You could do an NVMe drive off of this. It'll run through the chipset PCIe bandwidth. But these two right here, they're pre-wired directly to the CPU. Most everything else on the board is going to the chipset, and then the chipset has its own lanes that go to the CPU. So just a quick rundown, but there's a lot of cool little features Gigabyte does on their boards. The cool thing is this has Thunderbolt 3, dual Intel NICs. All my workstations have to have Intel NICs, and this is one of the few right now that has 2 Intel NICs. Intel Wi-Fi, I believe it is. Yeah, I better mute my phone. Let's see. Hopefully Aaron can jump in here. It'd be fun to have him on here. I gotta thank Aaron, man. Aaron's helps. He'll send me, leads sometimes that really are so helpful. Anyways, guys, let's build this out. We're gonna do CPU, RAM, NVMe drive, and then this will go off to the side, and then we're gonna work on the liquid cooler. So, hand tools for the motherboard. I'm getting ahead of myself. Part of my new process is I'm trying to do all the documentation as I go. So, accessories and stuff will go in this brown box. It's funny having cameras in the way. It's funny. It just hasn't happened for a long time. So we need our hardware for the M.2 drive. So we're gonna move that aside. We're gonna use that. Okay. One more. Here we go. And so we got the language installation guide, which that goes in the trash, but the manual will go inside the brown box that the client gets. The Wi-Fi antenna, Thunderbolt. This cable right here is if you wanted to run your monitor off a Thunderbolt connection, which is cool because then you could daisy chain, but it's not really one of those techs that I think Apple users probably use Thunderbolt more. You know, these SATA cables are just standard ones. We'll put those aside as well. Alright. And as we go along the way, we'll throw more accessories in there. If anyone's wondering, I'll touch basis on this, but this is the front panel for the Meshify. Pretty sweet. I'm trying to get Fractal Design to make me a customized badge. If not, I'm gonna have to have one like a decal or something made the same exact length, but they said they can do it, so I'm just waiting to hear on pricing. Let's get back to the motherboard. Put our box to the side for now. So serial numbers have already been recorded, so now it's just about opening stuff up. This Intel retail packaging really kind of is annoying. Takes up tons of space on the shelf, and then in the trash, in the recycle bin, takes up tons of space. Alright, let's get this put back together nicely so I could put them to the side nicely. If anyone ever wonders, I love using a data vac, guys, for cleaning. Let's see, which camera? There we go. You might see me use this along the way, which I'll mute when I do. Oh man, that's a bummer. So, speaking of laptops, I've been in conversation with Sager, who does like desktop CPU laptops, and it looks like I'll be good to go to start selling them. It's just I need to get my hands on one first before I feel comfortable selling them. And there's no retail there's no like sample units, so I'll have to buy one, but oh, it's all good, man. It sounds like you're on a laptop, so alright, so this is actually not the scariest part of a build for me, guys. All you gotta do for sure is just line up the triangles, but the thing, this scares the most, you know, this scares people the most. This is not the scariest part for me. The USB 3.0 header is the scariest part. Okay, one thing I do, guys, so this isn't necessary, but I'll lightly push down on the CPU now that it's seated, and then that way when I push down on the clamp, I know there's no way it can like pop out or do something funky. So let's see. Next, we'll remove the M.2 heatsink covers. And these do find their way back with the customer in the accessory box, but the screw will be screwed into the motherboard. Man, I bet that turbo speed doesn't happen very often, does it? So one reason I want to get my hands on the Sager laptops too is to see if I could, from what I understand, I think you could overclock them, but rather than overclock, I'm tempted to like tweak them around, maybe downclock a little bit and increase lighter thread counts, turbos. I don't know, it's just something to be really fun to tweak and mess around with, because there's so much thermal limitations, whereas with the desktop you could just go more all out. It'd be nice to tweak it, or maybe get like the 9900k and disable cores and make it like a 6-core 12-thread instead. That was something I tested also in RFO, and well, I actually didn't test it in RFO. I tested in just like thermally and all-core workloads, and man, 6 cores 12 threads versus 8 cores 16 threads only reduced temperatures by like 2 or 4 degrees. It wasn't really enough to justify on a desktop, at least. The goal was trying to get, instead of like a, you know, the goal was trying to see, can we do like 5.2 gigahertz all core or whatnot, and it's just, it's a hot CPU when you start overclocking it. Yeah, I wouldn't, on the ZBook I wouldn't mess with it. There is a tool for overclocking locked laptops, but you know, I just probably would leave it alone. So I'm gonna do the M.2 in the bottom slot, just because the video card would be right here, and the NVMe drive would be fine there, but you know, since we have an option, we're gonna go on the bottom slot. The other thing I do, guys, and this I recommend for all users, even though we're not using this slot, still do yourself a favor and install the hardware. That way, if you go upgrade down the road, you're not looking for it like a year later or whatever. Alright, so now it's time for RAM. Yo, man, what's up? I need to get another test bench, man. Did you go to TwitchCon, or is that where you were recently? Yeah, San Diego's pretty fun, man. I'm not gonna lie. Did you get a chance to explore the city, or were you mostly around the event the whole time? So guys, right now what we're doing is we're just sliding in the slots, the RAM. We're not pressing them in all the way. This is just my thing. It's not necessary. It's just the way I do it. And then when it's pressed down, when I press it down, I'm actually going to support it through the bottom with my fingers. With this Gigabyte board, since there are like steel braces on the slots, you feel zero flex when you do this. Some boards, you'll actually feel things move around. That's one reason why I like this board. The reinforcement's completely not necessary, but let's say we had a big heavy air cooler on here. Then all of a sudden, you know, like let's say a year down the road or whatnot, and you have fast RAM, it might actually make a difference. So we'll peel off the plastic now that we're done. Sometimes I do this first, sometimes I do it last, just to be honest. Oh man, I haven't been to Gaslamp in years. I hear there's a lot of homeless there now though. I don't know if it's still the case. We had like tapas, my wife and I had tapas and stuff down there. Alright, so once we unbox a liquid cooler, we'll use the brace, the mounting bracket, which it'll be a brace that goes alongside the back, and some standoffs on this side. But we're good to go. Wow, this motherboard. So another thing I do is I always orient the, I don't know if you guys will be able to see it. I always orient the battery letters correctly, but this motherboard basically had it done. It's not upside down or anything weird like that. So I keep it on this anti-static foam. We'll just set that right on top of the chassis. Alright, and I'm gonna have some coffee here real quick. So we'll mute. Aaron, man, welcome, dude. We're gonna be working on the liquid cooler right now. Motherboard got built out, chassis is prepped. Chassis was halfway prepped before the stream though. Alrighty. Let's get some of these empty boxes out of the way. Oh, I wanna say, guys, with the harness that's inside the chassis for the front I/O, like your power buttons and stuff like that. Actually, it's just it's not input output, it's just input. But the Gigabyte supplied, let's see, this one might be better. Gigabyte supplies a really cool adapter that locks in. I usually don't use these because Asus has one, but you know, it's a little different with Asus, where this one actually has locking pins. So you could just slide the connector in and it snaps in. It's really nice. I'll try to see if I could show that. I won't be able to show it on stream actually because it'll be too hard. But anyways, the Asus one, not so much something I use. The Gigabyte one, I kind of like it. Nice, nice. Alright, Truthman? I always butcher people's names, I'm sorry, but thanks for stopping by, man. Oh, thanks for hosting this, man. I need to get back to doing this more often. It's pretty fun. I might have to mute it and keep it on. Alright, Aaron, if you can chill, that'd be awesome. Rob, this should be hosted for a while. I haven't streamed in so long. I don't know if my affiliation status is still active, but when I was affiliated with Twitch, it would stay on a lot longer. Let's put so here's the other thing. There's an Intel booklet with the sticker and everything that makes its way into the box as well. I don't put it on the chassis, but I'll leave it in there so clients can do that. Alright, so now for some, to me it's fun because it's cable management, but we're gonna do the fans. We're gonna pre-build the liquid cooler, and you'll see one reason why I like the Fractal Design one so much. When I choose a liquid cooler, you know, an all-in-one cooler, I'm really picky, so there's only like, man, for 360mm ones, really this Fractal Design one is the only one I like besides the EVGA one, but the EVGA one is sold out. My main requirement is I do not want SATA power. It's one more harness to plug into the power supply. It's just, I don't know, it's just more clutter. I prefer like a minimalist look to my builds. So I prefer a 4-pin power cable. Secondly, the RGB cannot require software to be, managed. The EVGA one, without software, just stays white, and that's okay. Enermax has a really cool one, but I despise it. It meets the 4-pin power cable requirement, PWM, but where it fails miserably is it will stay on the Spectrum RGB color wave unless the software is actively running. If you set it, it has no memory. So if you uninstall or re-image your computer or whatever, and the software's not on there, it will just go Spectrum, full color, cycle wave. And the reason why I don't like software is because software comes and goes, updates happen, it gets broken, and that's like the #1 reason for crashing is weird software like RGB lighting. I've had so many issues with Corsair's software over the years, NZXT's software. Generally, the guys are really good about fixing it, but for workstation users especially, it's not something that I can roll with. Alright, let's see. This is the one annoying thing about the Be Quiet fans is you gotta pick your mounting. So basically what we're doing is they have an anti-vibration mount that's like it's a rubber standoff with a plastic pin. That's cool and all if it's just a case fan, but it's not suitable for like an all-in-one cooler. So, but either way you have to choose your mounting. So basically, I think this will be my go-to camera. Let's see. So basically, these just slide right on, and then they lock in, and you can remove them and stuff like that for people wondering. But this is just conforming to the standard 120mm fan mounting pattern. The rubber dampening mount also does, but does not use standard like screws. If you break the plastic tab, you're kind of SOL. Another funny thing with the Noctua, so the A12 fans are like almost the perfect fan, not including color. The main problem is the harness is too short, so you would need to run an extension cable in most situations. But those fans are silent. You could run them at full speed, 2000 RPM, and they will be silent. Well, very quiet. So Rob, if you're watching, man, this is the liquid cooler that will be in your system. I don't know if you'll be running any of these, but this is what will be in them. And this was an upgrade. Originally the quote was for an air cooler, but I don't know, the supply chain dried up. So what I normally do when something like that happens, I give my clients a free upgrade. The other thing too, Rob, if you're watching, man, the quote was originally for the 2070s. I got you guys the 2070 Supers. It was such a small difference in price, I just threw that in as well. So that, basically the 2070 was a good card. The 2060 Super is darn near the same performance, and the 2070 Super is so much closer to the RTX 2080 performance. So, yeah, you guys, few little bonuses. Alright, we'll put this box to the side. So we'll show what a 360mm radiator looks like. So that's a 360 right there, guys. Your typical tower air cooler. This is like a single tower air cooler. It's this size right here. These are great for like stock speeds and stuff like that, but with all the cores that have been coming in, they're just not enough for overclocking. The dual tower, the Be Quiet, Dark Rock Pro 4, and the D15. These are dual tower coolers, meaning there's two fin stacks. This is what you need to barely keep the 9900K from throttling. So keep that in mind. When you get a laptop with a 9900K, there's just no way it can work at its full potential like at a desktop. It is better than a mobile CPU, but it is not the same performance as a desktop. I mean, look at all this thermal capacity we have. You know, this alone is bigger than the laptop. Well, you know, when you think about it. Some laptops are that wide, but they just couldn't fit this. Asus has a laptop with literally quick disconnects where you could actually do an external liquid cooling solution they offer, but typically you're just never going to get the same performance as a desktop. Oh, what did I miss? Yeah, Rob, I think the ones you have might be the mobile. Do you know if you guys have the full-on 9900K or the mobile processor? I was talking to Sager a little bit. I don't think my rep knew exactly. I don't think he knew exactly what he was talking about because he told me their laptop modules, but I think you told me you have full-on desktop RAM. So I'm not sure. I gotta call tech support. All right, Aaron, it's all good, man. All right, so another cool thing about this Fractal Design all-in-one cooler is that let's see if it'll show. There's an actual fan distribution hub here. So what you'll see me do is we're gonna route the fans to have the power cables come up the side and plug into the distribution block. That means for any future support needs, it's just a one wire to disconnect, and literally this comes out in one piece with fans and everything. Now I'll be able to ship a client basically one that's all wired up with fans already. So if they chose to do it on site for whatever reason, it's a lot cheaper to overnight something like this than dealing with cross shipping with the whole system. So and it's just silly how easy it is to do this. That's why I kind of like the Fractal over the EVGA one. With the EVGA one, even though I mount the fans to the radiator in a pool configuration, you know, you'd still have to deal with them being routed directly to the motherboard. Like all three fans, and then this would be routed separately in a more normal all-in-one cooler. So we're gonna put aside the hardware for the motherboard that I mentioned. This would be our AMD standoff. The Intel one is already in place. It'll start to get fun really soon, guys, I promise. Alright, that goes to the trash because that's where AMD belongs. I'm just kidding, guys. AMD is actually pretty good now, but it will not. Okay, so you guys have the 17-inch full-on desktop one. That's the only one they offer with 4K. So Aaron was asking me about 4K on the 15-inch, and the rep told me basically Clevo's their MOQ, or minimum order quantity, was higher than they wanted to work with. So that's why they just have the 4K and the 17-inch. Alright, so another thing that's going to work its way to the brown box is this user guide. Typically, this isn't something most customers will ever look through, but hey, if you're curious, I think there's like flow rate and stuff like that mentioned in there. Set that aside. So now, this will be the side that faces the front of the chassis. So, and the fans will be pulling air through it. So basically we'll have the front end that's all ventilated is going to pass the air through, and it's going to get sucked through the radiator. And this is one of the trade-offs I make. Technically, we'd probably have better performance in a push configuration. Push means the fan is pushing the air through the radiator. Pull, obviously, it's just pulling it through. Typically, a lot of fans work better in push. You might sacrifice 1 degree Celsius for pull. Some fans suffer more from it. Some fans could even lose, cause maybe a 2 or 3 degrees Celsius hike in temperatures. But this is one of those decisions I make because of the maintenance. It's just so much easier from a maintenance or repair standpoint. Just the ability to just deal with one thing to disconnect. Literally, we unscrew these easy to get 2 screws and the whole thing comes out. If we had to run it in a push configuration, the fans would fall, the radiator would come out, everything's just a hot mess, and requires you to have some juggling abilities, to say the least, whereas this is just so simple, anybody can do it. Like, technically I could probably do it one-handed. It'd be a little clumsy, but literally it's that easy. Some of the pros and cons to the Define series, so whether it's this one, the Meshify C, or the Define C, I love it because it has so much better cooling potential than the Sliger chassis, which is smaller. You'll see that in like the Striker, for example, Binbox. Although I believe they're finally gonna go with the larger chassis for more cooling. So it has better cooling potential. It's just easier to work on because it's larger. The downside is it's larger. It's for the end user, it's not a big deal, but the problem I have is it creates a lot of, I need extra packing materials and all that good stuff. The Sliger chassis is so easy to ship. It's not even hard to work on. It's just, the only bummer I have with it is that it doesn't have space for a larger radiator. I'm gonna mute while I use this guy. That said, though, I still love the Sliger Cerberus X chassis. That's why I offer builds in it. It's just, like most things, there's trade-offs. Alright, so my little trick here, guys, is I'm going to connect the fans first, and then we're going to go back and zip tie everything. And everything has an order. So basically, you'll see me cascade them. So top fan is tallest or highest, middle fan will be in the middle, and then bottom fan is the most bottom one. Top fan is gonna go closest. Let's see. I think you guys could see it this way. Here, I'll do this. Top fan will be in this one, this header, the farthest one this way. Middle fan will be in the middle one, and bottom fan will be in the bottom. And that's just so I know if a fan ever fails or whatever, something funky. It's just knowing where's everything plugged into and that it's consistent will help in troubleshooting remotely. See, I'm following the pattern I mentioned. And then basically we're gonna just kind of move the cables over. And they will be held in place because I'm gonna zip tie them down. Oh, I don't know if any of these cameras are gonna show it. I'm gonna my trick is that I zip tie them down at the closest spot to this pivot point. These don't move, so it's not like it's gonna create a lot of stress or anything, but that'll allow them to be held in place. So it's about 3 zip ties for this part of the build. And I am a little crazy about it, but I even do my zip ties on the same orientation. So there's the first one. So I'm gonna zip tie again right here, but we're gonna get this one to loop back around first. All right. Thanks for the follow. I'm gonna not be able to pronounce the name correctly, but thank you. So there's zip tie number 2. And you can see already everything's kind of nice and tidy. We're gonna do one more for good measure right down here. And this, guys, is why I love this cooler. Look at that. Don't tell me that's not easy, guys. So if this ever failed for whatever reason, because you know, hey, pumps fail, this does carry a 5-year warranty from the manufacturer. It's something like 80 or 100,000 hours is what it's rated for, but this is the only connector you need to worry about. This little 4-pin which goes into the motherboard, and the whole thing would come right out. It'll be mounted up with screws in the front right here that are all easy to get to. Technically probably 4 would be enough, but we're gonna use 10. I'm gonna use 10. And the only reason you'll see later I'm not gonna put screws in this bottom one is because it would make it harder to work on if I did that. The way the trim panel is on the Define or the Meshify C, this is just a step I do, so it's kind of like dummy proof. But there's clearly tons of holding power with, you know, these 10 screws. Let's see, 4, 8, yeah, 10. So that's it right there, guys. We're gonna go back to the motherboard. Set that right there. Put the knife away for now. Alright, so now we're gonna install this actual mounting hardware for the cooler onto the motherboard. This is what will mount the pump. Alright, man, Aaron, thanks for at least trying, man. One thing, it's not a secret, but a lot of people don't know, is that because of the patents, Azatec makes, they're the actual OEM for all of these pumps, and their pumps are used in server rooms. They're a very legitimate company. So like 95% of the pumps in the US are all actually OEM through all-in-one coolers, I should say. Like 95% of them are all coming through Azatec. And then what they offer to their customers, it's like a white label service. If you can purchase X amount to do something like this, they were telling me like it's in the thousands a month you need to buy. It's just, you know, it's not feasible for someone like me. But they'll customize them if you have enough, if you're gonna buy enough. They do have system integrator versions that are just plain I think they now say Azatec on it, but that may be something I switch to because the minimum purchase quantities are actually small. It's only like I think 20 at a time. But this hub and the one wire aspect of the Fractal Design Unit is, I think, a selling point. Something like an IT department or something, I think, will appreciate that. So the savings aren't really large enough to lose out on that feature. So now this is 100% ready to rock and roll. We're gonna wipe down the CPU with some alcohol. As soon as I find my lint-free wipes. These are marketed for these are Kimtech Science brand wipes. More for like glass, camera lenses, like equipment like that. I love them because they're lint free. They're in handy dandy packs, and they're quite absorbent. So the Kimtech wipes I was using before were fine on stuff like this, where it's already a clean CPU, but I kind of like these more. What are they? What's the exact? Well, if you go Kimtech 7553, you'll find it. Lens cleaning microfiber wipes, that's what they're called. It's just so much better when you're actually trying to take off old thermal grease and stuff like that. Or D-lids, I love using those when I do D-lids. So cool, we're ready to move on to the chassis again. Alright. We're gonna put the motherboard aside. I'm gonna have a quick sip of my coffee. And we're gonna get back to the chassis now. We will be dropping in the motherboard next, but I'm gonna show you what power cables I put in first. So let's see, any of these gonna show what I'm doing. Which one should we compromise? Alright, I'll just have to show you guys a little differently, but we're gonna pre-wire the 8-pin EPS, which is the connector. We're gonna pre-wire this 8-pin, and the 24-pin will not be pre-wired, but that just kind of makes life a little easier. Anyone wondering, this 4-pin, it's unnecessary, it's optional. If you're doing like sub-ambient, like liquid nitrogen, this probably isn't the best motherboard, but that's basically what it's there for. The power rating on the 8-pin is theoretically enough to probably take the CPU to like 5.4 or 5.5 gigahertz if you had the cooling potential, but that's not what we're doing today on this build. So yeah, we're gonna go back to the 8-pin EPS. So actually, let's unbox this right here. This is the brand new 850 watt EVGA G5 series. The cool thing, guys, I contacted EVGA. If you have a G3 power supply, the harness will be compatible. So if you have custom cables or anything fun like that, or let's say you have a G3 and it failed and you just want to get a new one, you don't want to deal with the RMA process, the G5 can drop right in, no compatibility issues. And actually, EVGA actually just updated their site to show that on their aftermarket harnesses. It now actually says G2, G3, and G5. This will make its way into the brown box. This will as well. And another one that I don't include all of these because they'll get lost. I'd rather have a client call me and I'll mail them out. But we will include a spare SATA harness, which SATA is around here somewhere. We'll include a SATA harness so that if you want to add a drive later you can without any fuss. But yeah. The easiest way to tell the difference between a G5 and a G3, despite like the badge, would be that they switched the fan shroud to green for some weird reason. Doesn't bother me though. It's not shown in builds or anything, but they're, I think, going with like a green theme, like green as an energy efficient theme. And I think that's what's inspiring the green fan. There's a green LED back here with the E logo. And I gotta read up on that, but I think what it is when it's green, that means the fan is stopped. And then when it's not green, that means the fan is spinning. And I think they probably did that because a lot of people will think their fan's not working, but in reality, it's in passive mode. That's, and EVGA calls that eco mode. So right now, this would be the switch right here, on and off. If you just wanted your fan to run constantly, keep eco off. If you want it to shut off when it doesn't need it on, you know, let's say your power limits or your temps are in a certain range, it'll stop spinning the fan, leave that on. Okay. So we're gonna get that out of the way. We're gonna need our 24 pin and our EPS, which are right here. One thing I really like, guys, that's funny, man. You know what oh man, I forgot that software, but there's that software so you could use one mouse across two computers if they're on the same network. Oh man, I'm blinking out. I've never used it except for testing it. So what EVGA now does is they're bundling the cables in specific bundles. So this bundle right here is SATA only, which is cool. This one is PCIe and Molex, which is the one we need. And this is PCIe and Molex also. So like video cards, right here guys, video card power and a Molex. So this particular bundle has the ones I'm using. This bundle has the PCIe harness that has a pigtail. Let me show you on, because this one's already open. Basically, for those that are curious minds or inquiring minds, if I could find the right one. There we go. So the video card we're using requires an 8-pin and a 6-pin. So there's this harness right here that would be just one connection to the power supply, but would have both of your connectors. You could do two 8-pin, one 8-pin, one 6-pin with this pigtail connector. But, and this is one of those things that's not necessary, but for just more amperage, I like to run just the two single 8 pins, which are, let's see, it's this one. For some weird reason, things are made with Molex. Oh, I'm sorry, that was just the Molex adapter. This is a floppy cable. I don't know if anyone remembers floppy drives. I believe that's the floppy power cable. The Molex adapter. This is not the one I needed. It's the one that has the Molex. I think this is it right here. Yeah, man, it's been a long time. I was looking at, what's up, Wild Thing? Wild Thing, I think you're in Australia. It's late over there, isn't it? Alright, let's see. It's been almost a year, man. The last stream I saw that was archived on my computer was from December. It was super busy, and then it's not as busy now, so I have more time to do this stuff. So here we go. See, this is a just the 8-pin, no pigtail. That's what we're using. certain cards that are very power hungry will actually require that kind of setup. So that's why that's another reason why I like using it that way. Let's say someone upgrades to a Titan RTX, you know, you'd be covered. Alright, I haven't done this live in a long time, so I'm actually happy. Things just seem to be going kind of smoothly. Alright, so we're gonna pre-wire one of them. The 8-pin EPS is the only one, and only because it's a lot easier when the motherboard's not in there, because I could, like, you know, feed it through and just kind of shove my hand through there and all that good stuff. So one thing, guys, the Meshify C just has a magnet filter up here. The Define does not. It actually has a flat panel you could snap in. I removed that as well as part of my assembly, like chassis prep, so that I could see through the top. It just makes it so much easier when you can see through the top. So now let's get some zip ties. I would normally be sitting for this, but we're going to stand since we're streaming. This chassis has like zip tie anchors all in like the right spot. I love it. So I really like, this is my favorite part of a build, is cable management. Really? It's funny, man. I found some floppy drives recently from high school, and I have a USB floppy, and I lent it out. Like, maybe it was right before I moved. I lent it out, and I haven't gotten it back, and I think I'm gonna search for a new USB floppy. I know what's on there. It was like a science fair project and some PowerPoint presentation stuff. So what you'll notice, guys, I'm just keeping the zip ties loose right now, because that way I could adjust, you know, my cable length still. Same thing here, you can see these are still loose. This is the only one that's a little tight. I could still wiggle it through, but at least it's kind of holding everything. So I could technically pre-wire the 24 pin, but it would make it a little tricky with the motherboard. When I do it happens rarely, but when I do a motherboard replacement, I leave the 24 pin installed and you just kind of move it out of the way. So now we're going to drop in the motherboard. I'm just going to undo some of these real quick. This will be the slot for the video card. I don't even know how many people are in here. You guys, yeah, might be the only ones. Rob might be in as well. Alright, let's double check. Oh, this is one thing we need to do. I can't put the motherboard in without these. This is one thing I don't like about Fractal Design, is I have to do the standoffs. I have to screw in every standoff. Yeah, Aaron's probably on mute. That is correct, Wild Thing. Man, you like have the record for, like, I don't even know if a piece of paper might barely fit in your gap from the video card to the cooler. Alright. So they use like a brass standoff. I'm gonna get these in the right spot. I'm gonna do these by hand first. Get them in the right position. I need to get like a nut driver that's the right size. I don't have one that goes small enough. But back from Mercedes-Benz, I have a 5.5, and that's like the smallest I have, and I think this might be like a 4mm. Wild thing, what was that wouldn't fit? This one. Oh. Yeah, so maybe we'll need to go like maybe a strand of hair. That was a really clean looking build though, man. It was kind of cool. Fractal Design retweeted it. One thing I experimented with last year was a wireless lav mic, and now I remember why I tried that. Because with glasses, these the headset actually starts to get annoying after a while. Alright, so we're good to go. The center standoff, let's see, if you guys are looking at the top right, the center standoff is just like a stud to help like locate the motherboard, which is nice for especially new builders. Even for me, I appreciate that. So we're just gonna kind of make sure everything's out of the way. Just gonna slide it in. When I build in the Sliger chassis, I usually have the liquid cooler pre-mounted already at this point. Another thing I do, guys, on these, one of the cables got away from me. Another thing I do is I do not connect the hard drive light. With an SSD, man, and these are NVMe's, it flashes so much it's actually distracting. So I'll leave it down there, but it won't be connected. Oh, that's cool, man. So you went with the liquid cooler. One thing back in the day, man, on overclock.net, there was a member named D-Wood, and he had a bracket just like that, and I don't know, but I swear NZXT either bought the design off of him or copied it. And I'm sure they bought it because the guy stopped making it, and then next thing you know, like, you know, it was something like 8 months, a year later, NZXT's released. But I was using that bracket on my GTX 770. I did a volt mod where I soldered a potentiometer to it, and I was able to feed it 1.5 volts. And with a you know, all-in-one cooler pump on there, I was able to get 1.5 gigahertz. But it wasn't until I switched to the EK block that I was able to hold that for the whole benchmark run. When I had the all-in-one cooler, it would bounce around from like 1400 to 1500. And then when I went EK, it dropped temps like another 10 or 15 degrees. And it would do like 1515 to like 1480. Alrighty, so we got all of the motherboard screws installed, and I'm gonna run it with this impact. It's a Milwaukee M12 impact with the clutch set on number 1. This is something I started doing because I just started building so much, and I wanted to create a process where I could train someone to build and they would have the same results I would. So that's why I'm doing this. I've built at least 100 computers with this guy, and I know it's good. And yeah, so that's, if you guys are wondering, that's what's going on. I'm gonna mute real quick. Alright, we're good to go. Number 2 setting would probably be just a hair too much, but number 1 is great. You could zap it and sit on it like a second and it's perfect. So connecting the audio. I do this in a specific way where the cable loops around. It helps take up some of the spare slack, and it also helps the cable not have tension. Those wires are so small that you really got to be careful plugging them in. Alright, so this is going to be tough to show, but what I'm going to do right now is we're going to do the front I/O. So we're going to be plugging this guy in. I'm going to take the headset off because I need to get my head in there. Yeah, man, the 10980XE, or yeah, like you said, whatever they call them, $1,000, 4.8 gigahertz, boost 3.0, which dude, 4.8 gigahertz. If it's even 2 cores, that means I could probably manipulate it. So let's say 6 cores at 4.7, 4.6 on an 18-core processor, and then taper down. Let's say 4.4 on all cores, repeatable. With an all-in-one cooler, that could be a killer CPU, especially at $1,000. I think they increased the PCIe lanes, but I don't know how they're distributing it. I'm sure it's just through the chipset. I was watching Paul's Hardware last night, and apparently it wasn't supposed to get announced yet, but someone leaked it, so Intel just said screw it and released the information earlier than planned. But we could thank AMD for that. And that said, at $1,000, I think Intel's still in trouble. For AEC users, I think Intel's still gonna be my favorite. But I don't know, because when you get into the laser scan guys, PCI Express 4.0 that Threadripper 2 is gonna have. Man, I don't know, man. That's going to open it up for some killer NVMe RAID configurations. I just don't know. That's the tricky part. It's going to really depend on what their CPUs release at. Because Epic, too, they already have 64 cores. 64 cores, what, 128 threads? Just want to make sure I'm not muted still. And apparently it set the record for the first CPU that could render 8K footage in real time. So can you imagine that if you're a videographer and you're shooting in 8K because you got a fancy red camera? Jesus, like imagine like when you downscale to 4K, man, amazing. Sorry guys, just making sure none of these are work emails. Alright, so we now have the audio connected. We have our front power and lights, reset switch. I mentioned we're not gonna connect the hard drive light, but we're gonna leave it down here. Just kind of, this is what I'm still debating on what I'm going to do with it. I think I'm going to leave it down here, like right here, I'll show you guys in a second. I'll show you what I was doing. So now we're gonna tighten up that slack, make it look all nice and pretty. I was bringing the cable all the way back up to right here. So what you'll see is I'm gonna tighten up the cable so it's nice and straight. Sometimes people ask me about cable management. Like, look, there's guys that are killer at cable management. I'm just one of those guys. I'm not the only one, there's a lot of them. But anyways, my thing is I love vertical lines. So you'll see the theme is I like vertical, the power pin's gonna go vertical. And if I have to go horizontal, I try to go horizontal. Diagonal's cool and all, but I prefer straight lines, horizontal and vertical. So same trick I did here with the all-in-one cooler. So I tightened up the slack and worked my way back, and now that there's extra, we're just gonna loop it. We're gonna tighten, and this is all of our slack, and now that'll get zip tied nice and tidy right here. And that's gonna just boom right there. That's where that's gonna go. Sometimes yeah, Wild Thing, all right, Aaron, man, nice to see you back. It's funny, you have your big red workstation I built you, but my stream setup is kind of like a big red also, man. I was really big into red builds in the early 2011, and it's all red RAM, red motherboard accents, red video card accents, red lighting. It's my 2700K. It's at 4.8 gigahertz. It's still at 4.8 since it was new. So people that are worried about overclocking, if you do it safely, it'll last for years and years. That CPU is at least 6 years old now. I don't know, maybe longer. And it's still fine, but that's because we set voltages into a safe range. Temperatures have been in a safe range. Things you have to consider with overclocking is your temperature affects stability greatly. A 10-degree temperature change in your ambient can introduce stability issues if you're at the ragged edge. So I prefer to be a little more conservative with my overclocks, and that's my comfort zone. Stability over everything is my thing. Reliability, everything like that matters more to me, because if you have the fastest system in town but it breaks on you a year in or 2 years in, what fun was that? So here we go, nice and tidy straight line. This is only our front power connectors right now. Sometimes you might see me do a fan cable here. It depends on the build, but this layout is standardized to this workstation I build, so that if I build one a month from now, 2 months from now, it's going to be the same way. Same thing with the power cable. And sometimes IT directors, or I saw this at Autodesk University last year. There was a little bit of a fear, like, the support aspect. And I'm like, dude, everything's identical. Every build is the same. So now we're gonna tidy up our 8-pin, which is our EPS. You can see it's kind of dangling right here. That's gonna get plugged in, and then we're gonna tighten up the slack and work our way back. And this is why I like being able to see from the top. It just makes it so much easier. And then we're gonna tighten it up, and we're gonna, I know you guys can't see this, but I'll show you the final product. I'm just gonna work my way back, again carrying with a theme that every one of my builds will be this way. Because this is a fully modular power supply, meaning none of the cables are actually, like, part of, on the power supply. They plug in. If this fails, it's like a 5-minute job to replace it. It pops out the back, you slide a new one in, you're good to go. These carry at least a 5-year warranty. It used to be 10 years. I don't know if it's still 10 years, but on the G5 and G3s, but so it's not like these are unreliable, but I really plan out, like, in a failure, what's gonna fail and how can we fix it quickly. That's my main focus. Yeah, and I think Asus is now as well. They were advertising that they're using liquid metal, so they're using, I think, I'm blanking out on the name. I have it right here. I think I put it away. Man, not Cool Laboratories. It's their competitor, Thermal Grizzly. But Aaron, I'll tell you, like, from experience, when the 7700 came out, I delidded a 7700K Clevo chassis, and it helped when it was CPU only workloads. It lowered temps like 10 degrees, something like that. But as soon as the video card got touched at all, it would just max out the thermal capacity and everything would get heat soaked. And but like, if you're in Revit, that will help. It'll probably help you stay at boost. So it's really cool they're doing that. I suppose I can as well, since Sager will let me order bare bones chassis. So don't talk me into it. I'm tired of delids. I think this year I did like 200 delids, dude, on the 9900K. So I'm tired of delids. But that said, I don't know, maybe we could do something. Alright, so here's the end result with the EPS. This right here is the audio one, so now that that's in, I'm going to tighten that down and cut that as well. Use these wire cutters, just helps me get a nice flat cut when it's in there like that. So our audio, perfect, horizontal, vertical, EPS, same thing, comes across, and this will plug into the power supply. It's going to slide right in, fan down, and that'll just super easy. It'll allow for some movement. So next will be the 24 pin. That's going to come in through here. So I think if I leave it like this, you guys can see what I'm doing. Yeah. So I'll try to, you know, these things have these pre-bends from packaging. I'll try to straighten them out. Alright, I'm gonna shove it in here. I have to rotate it, do a 180. Listen for the click. One thing, so I've gone through a lot of motherboards over the years, like brands, and MSI was probably the first board I used back when there was real BIOSes, and on AMD, and I liked it a lot. It was well thought out, but with the old AMD 6-core, I had the 1100T Phenom 2, it would blow the VRMs. I went through 2 of those, and since then I haven't used MSI. I've had friends that have used them and they've had boards fail. Just more than you hear. Like, I've had boards fail on all brands, you know, it happens. But just enough for me to kind of feel like, I don't know. So at the end of the day, it comes down to ASRock, Gigabyte, or Asus. Asus has the best BIOS, I feel. So for heavy overclocking, I like Asus. ASRock kind of copies the Asus BIOS. They used to be a sister company of Asus at some point. I don't think that's still the case. It might be. I give ASRock credit because they do the craziest stuff, like X299 ITX, MATX, ASRock. But if I can avoid ASRock, I do, because they'll do really good feature sets, but it's like their PCB layout. Like, the motherboards have a lot of flex, and that's scary over time. Abula3, man, thanks for tuning in, Sir John. That's correct, man. Matisse, go Matisse for workstations. Matisse, which one is that? Is that a code name for AMD's system? I'm not sure. Yeah, Asus is Gigabyte's fan control can be funky sometimes too. Asus, I like Asus, man, but it was funny. So I originally was using their WS Z390, and one of my clients, we needed dual Intel NICs, and so we were going for Asus, and there was a bug with the WS board where if two Blackmagic capture cards were plugged in, it would only recognize one. Z390F worked, my old Z170 board worked, and ultimately the Gigabyte worked right out of the box. From what I understood, there was needing to be some sort of an update, and while I love the Z390WS from Asus, the Gigabyte just hits every checkbox, man. I mean, it doesn't have 4 PCIe 16X slots, but most of my workstations don't need it, and when I do need to go that route, I'll just go Asus again. It'll be more of a custom, but I had to standardize with the board, and I chose Gigabyte. Yeah, so with not MSI, so I like them for video cards. Their Venta series is nice and plain and simple. It's what I need for a video card. But motherboards, I don't know, man. Look, I know there's tons of people that have a good experience with their MSI board. It's just a little scary for me building a lot of systems. I'd rather stick with, ultimately, Gigabyte and Asus are my top 2 picks. X299, I use the Asus Prime 2 Deluxe, and Z390, I'm on the Designator Z390 from Gigabyte. So guys, at this point, we're going to do the liquid cooler. That's all that's left for kind of like major assembly. The video card will pop in, and then we're just sliding in the power supply. We got our NVMe drive plugged in, we got RAM, CPU. If we had a client that wanted the Intel NIC, the 10 gigabit NIC, it would be down here. I would use the 4X slot down here. The X550 T2, I think it's 4. If it's 8X, then I would have to go up here. I can't remember. I haven't used one in a month or two, and it's not something that people go for often. Once the liquid cooler's in place, you'll see me plug this in. This is the 3.0 header for the front. If this was a gaming build and I was trying to make it super pretty, it would be routed down the back with these cables, and then it would poke back in. But I route this through the front for functionality. It's super easy to repair this way. I mentioned this is the scariest part of a build for me, this 3.0 header. Plugging it in isn't that scary, but removing it especially is. Because these locking tabs, if you're not careful, you'll pull the whole connector out away from the motherboard. So when I route it in this way, I have plenty of space to disconnect it and pull directly away. If I'm routing in through one of these wire grommet holes, I now have a sharp 180, and I'd have to cut zip ties and feed it through and then try to disconnect. It's just, this is a workstation, so that's kind of the route. It's going to come down in from the side here. Enough talk, let's do the liquid cooler. For the sake of the stream, I think I'm going to try to do this vertically like this. Like, usually I lie it down. Man, 8-bit, that's a long time ago. Abula 3, are you an international viewer? I'm curious because I don't think 8-bit is around in the US anymore. Or maybe it's because they just went... Okay. Man, 8-bit, we used to have them out here years ago. I think they were mostly, what, late 90s, early 2000s? Thanks for tuning in, man. It's kind of cool seeing how many people are from around the world. I think there's only like 2 US viewers. Actually, I said I'm going to do this standing because we're on stream. Normally, I lie this down. You'll see me lie it down. I'll drop it. Actually, let's do it the way I normally do it so you guys can see. I don't think it'll... Yeah, it's the stream, but you guys, that way you can see how I normally do things. So this has thermal paste already on there. A lot of people have done reviews, and it's applied so perfectly that it's really a really good thermal application. I don't change it out. It's good enough where I don't need to. Actually, let's do something. There's a plastic film on the all-in-one cooler I need to remove, and it's easier to remove it outside of the chassis. Another thing kids won't understand is now so many boards have the I/O cover on the motherboard. It's like many new builders will never experience the moment of forgetting to install one. Alright, so I don't think I've ever forgotten to install one, but I remember I was doing an upgrade at a client and I forgot to switch it out. So I went to plug it, or put the motherboard in, and I was like, oh shoot, it's not lining up. But thankfully it wasn't like a situation where it was all built already. So we're gonna route this. We're gonna route this so the cable's downward. It's in this configuration. It's just the cleanest to me, and it makes sense. Just gonna drop it on there. Get the thumb screws started. Alright, so now we're gonna do this by hand. I don't like to use impact tools on this. Abula 3, I'll read that in a second here. So one thing with this all-in-one cooler, guys, also there is an auto setting and a PWM setting. And it's just a ring around the pump that you rotate and you switch it. This is kind of like a set and forget, but if you set the fan header to 100% speed and you set it to auto, the pump will control the fan speeds automatically. It tends to be on the silent side and it's really quiet, but it's not the coolest running setting. So what I normally do is set it to PWM and I'll control the fan curve myself. I'm gonna zip tie the power cable in a second here after I drop in the cooler. So let's see, is it coming in? Yeah, it's showing. We're gonna feed the bottom end first, and then just kind of put it in there. And now I could just rest there while I get the screws set up. Actually, those can go over there. Derlu, what was that, man? Yeah, dude, those, especially the ASRock IO shields, were like stamped and so thin. I've been cut on the ASRock ones before. Right? Dragon text might actually, but yeah, Aaron, that would actually Parallax team, that will actually be pretty clean. So Abdullah, I'm reading your text about fans. Yeah, so definitely between the manufacturers, they'll set up differently. Some have better default profiles than others. So usually I customize them. What I'll normally do with any motherboard is that I'll bring the low RPM up to about 40% usually as the minimum, and then usually I try to set them to 100% around the 75-degree range, but I don't know, I'll just kind of ramp it up in a specific way. It depends on the fan, the case, all kinds of stuff. Then I got a few of these started, and then I'm gonna stand the case up, and I'm gonna try to explain what I do with these radiators and stuff. Oh shoot, there went one of them, but I saw where it landed. You know, actually, I'm gonna do something different on this one, and you guys will be able to watch. This is specific to this build, and I'll tell you guys. Gosh, this headset is not the most comfortable. So it's mostly bolted in, it's just kind of really loose. Let's get some of the stuff out of the way here. So I usually choose the lowest mounting position for radiators and fans. Most of these holes are slotted, so that means you could shift things up and down a little bit. So I'll let gravity push down to the lowest point, and that's where I'll usually tighten up the hardware. But with this particular build, I route the GPU cables under the radiator, and it happens to be like a perfect fit. But I think I'm gonna leave it a little loose so it's easier to feed it in there, and then I'll tighten this up later. As long as I don't forget. I won't forget though, don't worry. Yeah. Robin, what was it again about the, I'm sorry Anthony, I cannot do that. I might have gotten a little sidetracked and missed something. Alright. So earlier I mentioned I don't install screws on the bottom too, so there's 10 screws holding this in place, and that they would be down here. Let's see, we'll move this over a little. So if you look at the bottom, the top right camera, there's 2 mounting screws down here. They require this front to be popped out, and then you could access them. But I don't want customers to do that because with this chassis, the USB and power and everything is part of this whole front cover. So if someone pops it out, they could potentially damage one of the wires for these ports, whereas the Define C, it's a cutout. The Meshify C, for whatever reason, they integrated it, but that's why I do not install these bottom 2. I don't want a customer to pop this out and not realize these are connected and damage something. So I try to think of all of the gotchas But with 10 screws, believe me, this isn't going anywhere. It won't vibrate, it's fine. So now let's work our way around, and we're gonna do the power cable and the USB 3.0. The power cable is going to follow around the pump, and then it's going to loop back up and plug into the CPU fan header. I'm going to have a sip of coffee, so I'm going to mute real quick. And it's funny, I just mentioned yesterday on the webpage about a laptop. It's so interesting. I just put laptops coming soon and I got an email about a laptop already. Alright, so I'm gonna just tidy that up real quick. It's gonna be hard for you guys to see, but that's what I'm doing. I'm able to do this with just one zip tie as well. A lot of times I'll pre-bend zip ties into like a hook shape. Let's see, against the white you can see. See how there's like a little bit of a radius? Just so I could feed it through openings and stuff like that. Alright, so now that the zip tie has been started, I'm going to feed this cable the way I want it to go, and then we're going to zip tie it. Just keep it nice and tidy. Okay, that's cool. I'm going to zip tie the radiator hoses together in one spot just to keep it nice and secure. Just barely zip tying them. It's just really for aesthetics. It's a nice, clean, tidy look. And then we're going to cut those. As I think about where I'm going to have lunch after this, my tummy is telling me to shove food in there. Alright, let's see. Yeah, same here, Abula. My personal rigs, I'll usually delid and do stuff like that, and I'll try to see where I can go and then settle on a 24/7 overclock. Yeah, no, I'm the same way, man. I try to keep it quiet nowadays. Man, back during one of the variations my 2700K went through was my 2700K and my 770 with the voltage mod were on a single 240mm radiator, and in order to keep it cool I needed like super loud 3000 RPM fans, but I was like, yeah, I don't care, I'm gaming, I got a headset on, or my surround sounds loud enough. It would be Battlefield normally, like Battlefield 3, so I'm like, it doesn't bother me. Nowadays though, it's all about silence. I love quiet. Alright, so we're gonna line it up, and this is scarier to me than the CPU. But once it's like perfectly straight, then I feed it, I wiggle it in very gently, and hope that I never ever mess one up. So now that it's plugged in, we got it flapping around here. We're gonna secure it. We're gonna zip tie it to the chassis here, and then that'll be it. One zip tie point is good on this one because I could actually zip tie it right here with the defined C. this anchor is used for the front filter, so I'll end up zip tying it up here in two places. Alrighty. I think I missed something, but whatever that was, awesome. Let's do this. And consistency is what I strive for. Zip ties in the same places on every build. A lot of IT guys, for some reason, are afraid to go with a system integrator like myself because it's not Dell or HP, thinking it's going to be harder to work on a system or something like that. But the truth is, these aftermarket boards have way better BIOS support. They catch bugs faster. Especially now with Windows, security updates are rolling out super fast for these boards as they come out. And there's so much transparency because it's a retail product. You get the change logs and you just get so much more information than with a Dell or an HP. It's the only way I would go. You know, you find your favorite integrator and go with them and don't look back. I think Dell and HP are great, they serve their purpose, but I'm biased also, but I would totally go this route. So many companies are using poorly configured systems because, hey, it was on sale and Dell gave it to me 50% off. Alright guys, I'm just double checking because I'm talking so much. I want to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. But it looks like the video card's next, then power supply, and this will be ready to hit the bench. You know, we'll tighten up the radiator, didn't forget about that. This will then later get a custom BIOS with my splash screen image. It'll go through settings, and then we're going to burn test it, and then it'll get its final out-of-box experience Windows image. But just to let you know, we're going to do the video card next. Well, we get to let's unbox it on the big table. We'll move this over. It's still nice and light because the power supply is not in there. Aaron, I can probably do with that. I'll email my Asus rep. Actually, I don't want to because the overclock setting. I know your settings, but let's just leave yours as is. But yeah, so basically the splash screen will show my Remus Computer Solutions image. Super cool. I love it. And that was thanks to CES last year, or this year technically, January. Finally met the right people, and I got in touch with I think that it's one of the engineering directors that actually does them. But they'll email it to you. You email them your logo, and they'll send you back the profile you need. The other thing is too, they could bake in whatever settings I want, but they did advise me, honestly, it's better that we don't do that. But if you want, we could do that. But I like to have control of that over here. So I mean, guys, I love EVGA, but one thing I hate is all the dang plastic. And that's one thing I like about MSI is they have MSI and I think Asus on some of their cards. They don't have nearly as much. But EVGA's customer service is why I buy them. They're awesome. During the GPU crisis of, what was it now, 2017? Yeah, I think it was 2017 when Bitcoin was going crazy. They helped me with allocations, so they got me the cards I needed. So I really appreciate that. So I try to use EVGA whenever I can, just to say thank you for helping me along the way. I like to share that, like, little me, they would help me out and get me the quantities I needed. That only works because they would send it to my distributor, but they would allocate them for me. So I like to use Mall Labs. Actually, I purchased from a few places. Newegg Business Channel. Amazon Business Channel, and then Mall Labs. I used to use ASI a lot, but my rep left, and it was a big reason of why I was buying from ASI, because he had awesome customer service. Their prices were a little more, but he would help me out a lot. And so now I just stick with Mall Labs and Newegg usually. Yes, that is correct, and we could talk about that too. That could be an interesting point. We could send in an image, and it just needs to be a certain dimension, usually like 600 by 600. It could range in colors, and we could like co-brand something. Like if you in your office or whatever wanted like a collaboration kind of image, we could do that. So guys, what's really cool, EVGA is one of those companies that listens to their customers. They got a bad rap on the 1080s when they first launched, where the VRM temps were a little warmer than they should have, and they were really skirting the limits of what they should have been. And they also blew a few components. To this day, I'm not sure if it's 100% clear what that component was, but a lot of people thought it was because of the higher temperatures. In reality, I think it was a bad batch of capacitors that were popping. It wasn't even related to the VRMs, but they did right and they fixed them. You could either send your card in, or they could send you the thermal pads, and they fixed it. They didn't try to skirt it under the rug. Asus, for example, they had a really bad AMD card. Thermals were horrible. They shrugged their shoulders and didn't care and moved on, business as usual. They got like no media grief because there was no news to report. Whereas EVGA kind of, because they were accepting responsibility, they kind of got dragged through the mud a little bit. And I think people lost sight that, hey, they actually fixed it. They listened and they fixed it rather than like not caring. And ever since then, their thermal pad use is amazing. We got thermal pads on this side, so there's actually contact points to this heatsink, this shroud, where some brands like Gigabyte will actually use a plastic one for their lower end cards. And their higher end stuff I think has thermal pads too, but there's just so much use of thermal pads and heat sinks on this card. I love EVGA. And this is the 2070 Super, so it's the refresh model. Alright, now we are going to get to drop it in. There's one interesting talking point here, which I'll mention. I mean, for starters, always listen for the click, which is going to be tricky because I have a headset on, but it's okay. So the talking point here is that some chassis are bowed a little bit, so you might line it up and you might pop it in. So guys, don't have a heart attack. It's not gonna fall out because there's a thumb screw down here that's actually holding the card. So sometimes there's some chassis that you'll slide this in and the chassis will actually be bowed outward. So you'd have to push in the chassis to get the screw started, and now you have weird tension on your video card. So what I would do in those situations, I pull the video card out, I push it in, and then I put the video card back in. That's what I do. Although I don't have that problem with Fractal Design, keep in mind like Corsairs, the NTXTs, whatever, even Fractal Design, keep an eye on that. And then the next thing is, just save yourself some time. When you tighten it, make sure your video ports aren't being blocked, because there's enough wiggle room where you could usually move this in a way where you might not be able to get this display port plugged in. So keep an eye on that. Some chassis are funky and you might need to pay extra attention. But yeah, just keep that in mind. You should be able to get them started with without, like, I mean, I do this just to wiggle it a little bit, not because it was necessary, but you should be able to get them started and screwed in without putting a ton of pressure on that. So now I'm just going to make sure everything's lined up, and then I'm going to tighten that by, well, without power tools. I'm going to do this one with a screwdriver, not my impact. Okay. I'm glad we're almost done, because I am going to, I think, get a burger for lunch. Alright, so now we got the power cables. Alright, so alright, let's see if that shows. This is what I do, guys. This is my thing. I'm sure I didn't invent this. Oh, one thing, when I'm doing power cables, I get my hand right behind the video card and I support it so that when I'm plugging these in, I'm not putting unnecessary tension on the slot, the PCIe slot. So I'll get a finger in there, hear the click, and we're good. And then what I do, we're gonna throw a few zip ties down the chain here. I use 4 zip ties, just so it stays nice and tidy as we route it into the chassis. So 1, 2, I'll space these out in a bit here. 3. One thing I'm tempted, guys, is to include individually sleeved cables on builds, but I don't know, it's an extra $100 and I don't know. Alright, so 1, just tightening them down, making sure everything's nice and straight. 3, 4. Now I stop and not go the whole way so that there's some flexibility, but I want them to kind of follow each other, so that's why I'm doing some zip ties. This is an optional thing since all of my systems are shipped. You know, just make sure things stay where I put them. So now we're gonna feed it into the basement of the chassis. And then I mentioned this will go under the radiator. I try to do this so you guys can see it. I normally do this in a different orientation, but let's do this a different way for camera. Alright. There we go. I think we're good. Okay, now I'm gonna move this my normal way so I could see for sure. Make sure we're going where I want it to go. There we go. There's a little corner that wasn't in where it should have been. Perfect. Make sure this isn't tight where it's pulling down on the video card. Don't want that. Alright, so now we're good. Now let's do the radiator before I forget. Alright. 1, 2. Alright, now let's go. Let's go with the tools. Sorry, let me mute. Alright, so one cool thing, guys, I put these little pieces of shrink tube on the end of the bit just so I can tell which is my number 1 and number 2, but you know, at just quick glance, like mindless. But it's kind of cool because you can kind of see where the tool is on stream better. Just thought about that. Alright, so I'm gonna try to do this so you guys can see, but we have what, 4 power cables. We got our 24 pin, we have our 8 pin for EPS, both of those are motherboard, and then we have 2 for the video card. Because we're using an M.2, we don't need any SATA, which is great. No SATA cable, no SATA power, so less failure points. That's a win in my book. Now we're gonna shove the power supply in as soon as I remember where I put it. In these chassis, I go fan down because there's really good filtration. You know, it's a good opening at the bottom. Some chassis have a really bad opening at the bottom. So I'll go fan up. And, you know, just so that it, you know, especially gamer builds, I'll go fan up because they could end up on carpet. And I, you know, don't want to cause a poor airflow situation. But this opening is so large. The standoffs are pretty good clearance. I always go fan down on the Fractal chassis. Usually. Don't quote me, but that's what I've been doing lately. Alright, so this is the cool thing, guys. I always save power supplies for last for this reason, where like it's completely open and I could adjust it as I plug things in and out. And this will show you how easy it is to work on the system as well. Like if you needed to replace it or remove it for testing or whatever, it's just easier to take it out sometimes. Let's see, I'm gonna need my light now. And there we go. We're gonna do the 8 pin, which is deep in there. So let's see. Okay, make sure it's in nice and square and then shove it in. I think last time I thought I should do the video card first, but I'm gonna continue on and do the 24 pin first. We're gonna do the bigger connector first because it's closer and easiest to see. Alright, felt the click, and now let's get the smaller one in. Click. And now let's do the video card, which I actually zip tie down here. So let's get an orange zip tie. I do these in orange so it's not easy to overlook. That way if somebody were trying to pull it out, they'll see like, what's this orange zip tie? Oh crap, there's a zip tie there. I've considered ordering gray zip ties, which I found online, so that might be what I do next, so it's easier to locate the zip tie points. Once I burn through my current inventory, I might be doing that. So let's get this all nice and lined up and figure out the way I'm going to plug these in. Actually, I think last time I may cheat later and double check off stream, but I think I routed it a different way this time. Last time I went over the 24 pin. Yeah, I think that's how it went. I want everything to be identical, so I'm gonna double check this later, but I'm like 99% sure this is how I did it. Alright. Yep, yeah, that was it. So Just snug this down. This is a point of pride in craftsmanship, as I really, and I keep this kind of loose too, guys. Keep that in mind. It's snug, but like just barely snug. This is why Mercedes-Benz has torque specs on their zip ties. Anyways, it's basically cable managed. It's gonna be, what camera can I take? Let's see, I'm gonna borrow this camera. Let's see if I could disconnect it easily. I haven't tried to do it. Alright, here we go. So look how nice that is. And then there's still room to move this, like if you needed to like do some sort of servicing, or where you would add a hard drive. A 3.5 inch is down here in the basement. There's some mounts, so you might need to move that a little bit, like, hey, let me disconnect this to wiggle around to bolt things in. There's going to be a bracket up here for 3.5 inch drives, be that hard drives that are 2.5 inch or SSDs. But that's basically it right there. Once we bolt this in, that's the cable management I strive for all the time. So now let's plug this back in. Hey Caitlin, what's up? It's kind of cool to catch you in here. How does this go? Sorry guys about the shaking. Alright, let's see. Let's get this nice and dialed. Alright, how were we set up here? That'll work. I'll fix it. There we go. Because my OCD would bug me. So now guys, last thing that's left on this bad boy is the bracket for the power supply and the SSD one. So yeah, this could go two different ways. I just want to make sure I get it right. I'm gonna leave this lightly screwed in. We're not gonna tighten it down just yet. Okay, so I just got it started. That way I could wiggle things around as I bolt in the power supply. Let's get our power supply bolts. Thank you. Hold on a second, let me catch up. Okay, thanks Caitlin. It's a 9900k 2070 Super workstation. 64 gigabytes of 3200 megahertz RAM, 1 terabyte Samsung 970 Evo Plus, Z390 Designaire from Gigabyte, Fractal Meshify, which I think you've worked with, and then the S36. What am I forgetting? Anyways, so now that all the screws are started, I'm going to tighten down the thumb screws a bit here. We'll tighten those down, and then we'll tighten the actual 4 that are mounted on the power supply. That way everything's sitting nice and there's no weird tension on anything. And we're on the home stretch, guys. This will just slide right in up here, and we're gonna do the thumb screw. This is why I take it out, because if I left this in, it would block some of my access when building and zip ties and all that stuff. But now that everything's zip tied in place, it's real easy to get on. As long as you can line it up. Where's the hole? Of course, this would happen when I'm on stream. Are you guys slid in? Sheesh. Oh, the zip tie, the head of the zip tie, the locking part was blocking it. There we go. Now we can go in. So the little tab of the zip tie that has the locking portion was like at an angle that wasn't letting it slide in. So what you could do is technically mount 3 SSDs up here or 3 2.5-inch drives, and because SATA cables are usually daisy chained, one cable should be able to get all 3. Most likely most people probably won't use this to that capacity, but that's there. You could do a 3.5-inch drive in the basement still. I include the standoffs and the washers from the chassis in the brown box, and then now we just gotta pop things on. Let's do the front panel on stream, especially because I want to explain this to people that may not be used to this chassis. It goes on and off in a particular way. There's a tab down here at the bottom that you have to push on, and it's funky because you got to do it blind when you're removing it, but basically it just slides in. There's some tabs, you just slide it in at an angle and then you just pop it in. Boom, done. To remove it, it's just the opposite. You could, I kind of do it this way, but you get your fingers in there. You'll have to remove the dust filter that's normally in place. So you remove your dust filter, slides out the front, and then you get your fingers in there, and then it's tricky, but trust me, that's how it is. And that's it. Fractal Design sells color-coded ones. You get these in like 10 different colors. And they also have this chassis in white, but availability is kind of tricky on the white one. So now that the front panel's on, we're gonna, I'll check up with you guys on stream right now. Now we'll just slide in the filter, and then we'll do side panels. One is a glass one. Let me see what's going on. Caitlin, this is gonna be blacked out. Abula, I do custom loops on occasion, not so much for customer builds. On occasion I do. This workstation, that's kind of where my hand is, has an EK loop in it. I've done a few EK loops for customers. They mount on the backside. What mounts on the backside? Aaron, what were you talking about that mounts on the backside? So this is a workstation, so it's going to be kind of blacked out. I'm going to email the client to see, because there's some RGB on here with the video card and on the motherboard. So I might just black everything out. We might set it to red, which is their company colors, or possibly white. But this is the blacked out tinted TG panel, so it's going to look super cool. I could plug in the one back here and show you guys on stream in a second. Let's get these panels on before I get too sidetracked. We'll do the boring one first, and then we'll do the glass one. So this just slides right on. 2 thumb screws. I really like how they did the R6 though, where it like pops in and the thumb screws are technically optional. So nice and flat. Since this other side is tempered glass, I'm gonna make sure I'm extremely careful. Gonna get my thumb screws handy. I think we'll leave those up top. Alright, so now let's get the tempered glass. Even though I have gloves on, I'm gonna try to touch it as little as possible. There's foam on one side, guys, so keep that in mind for insulate, like, you know, dampening and stuff, harmonics. No weird vibrations or anything from like spinning fans. So we're gonna just peel back the, I'm gonna leave this on for as it's a client build, but we'll just kind of do that number. This is a little bit for show because technically the system is going to get stress tested and everything. Although I do stress test with the panel on, this is how it usually sits. Afterwards though, I guess I could still see. Normally I power it up with all the panels off so I can make sure all the fans are spinning and there's no weird noises. So usually I do this later on after it's been BIOS updated and stuff, but whatever. And there's a top filter, which I think I left in the box. Thank you. Although when you're pointing the backside saying, oh yeah. So 3.5 inch drives can mount up here, and a 2.5 inch can mount up here, and 3.5 on the bottom. If we were going air cooled, this could have stayed in place, which could have mounted either 2.5 or 3.5 inch drives. But with this removed, you could still mount one on the bottom. There's a little cutout for it. So we could power this one on. It should boot just fine without anything connected. I'll just power it down manually. Where's my cables? I moved some cables around so things look nice on stream. And everything by default is set to blue. So we'll see blue on the EVGA card and blue on the motherboard. I always plug these in with the power switch off. And then we flip it on and let's see, will it work? It turned on, woohoo! So, let's see, I'll just tilt it a little bit. You can see the chipset has some LED lighting. The upper left, like where the rear I/O on the motherboard has lighting, and the video card has some lighting. Usually my workstations I black them out, but this client asked for the TG panel in particular. They're a design and architect firm, so we'll probably end up switching it to their company colors. I gotta email them or whatnot. So guys, that's a build. Any questions before I go on my lunch break? And then also real quick, this is the filter on the top. So, oh, you know one thing I didn't do on stream? I forgot to do the 120 in the back. Usually my air-cooled builds, I don't do one in the back. This is liquid-cooled. I do one in the back to help pull air through. So we'll do that we'll do that later. Yeah, man. Fractal Design really has a nice minimalistic look. I'm trying to get the badge changed out. Apparently they offer them in custom, like I could get a custom one ordered up, so I'm waiting to hear back what that's gonna cost. Like how many do I need to order and stuff, but it'll be pretty cool if it says like, you know, Remis Computer Solutions or something like that. And then if not, we'll probably just get a decal made that's the same size. But yeah, Fractal, like this is probably the most compact ATX mass production chassis that, you know, you could do a 360mm in. Other than that, if you don't need a 360, Sliger with the Cerberus X would be the smallest, which I don't think I have a bare chassis in the garage. I don't think I have it in here. There's like an old chassis that's in the garage. Yeah, so, but for 360mm support, it's basically this or the NZXT, whatever it was that replaced the S340. That'd probably be the most compact. I actually have an S340 in the garage. Could put it side by side. I think, yeah, that accepted a 360, but I think it wouldn't do the Corsair ones. Hold on. Yeah, there was a 360 in there. It's the S36, and I just all I did was change out the fans to be quiet. I'll be right back. I think I'm gonna see if the S340 is handy. Alright, so here's a side-by-side of the, let's power down this one. Cool. Looks like it's powered down already. LEDs are off. Basically, S340 versus the Define C Meshify C chassis. My cameras weren't really set up for this, but you kind of see there's a size difference. The Define chassis being more compact. The S340 was a favorite of mine though. That was really compact for the time. Now the refresh is cool and all, but I think I still prefer the S340, although I haven't built in the refresh model, the 510 or whatever it is. So other than that, I think I'm gonna call it a stream. Caitlin, it'd be cool to see you start building again. Hopefully maybe you do some stuff on the channel. Yeah, so keep in mind, you probably already know this, but for folks that don't, the Meshify does come with a clear glass version. So this is like the quote-unquote blackout. So it's tinted, but there's a clear version with white PCIe covers, and the fan has the white fan blades on the clear glass model. The Define C, I don't think has the blackout option. I think you have to get the Meshify to get the black window, the tinted window. But it's pretty cool. I like it, actually. Thanks. Yeah, it was fun. A lot of like people joined in, and I wasn't really sure because everyone's working and stuff. And it's funny, it's either this time slot or like 2 in the morning. So, but guys, thanks for stopping by. It was fun having so many familiar names. Hopefully we could start doing these more often. Maybe once a week would be cool. It's a lot of work to do these. It slows me down a bit, but... Okay. Robin, were you in the Netherlands or was it Sweden? I think that explains that. I think we had Australia. I think Guatemala was mentioned. There was a lot of international viewers. I think there were only like, including Caitlin, Parallax team, and then Rob. I think I only had 3 in the U.S. There might have been 3 or 4 international viewers. Cool, man. Run RFO benchmark on that thing. It'd be fun to see how it does. I don't know if you've mentioned your benchmark score on the laptop. So anyways, guys, thanks for the stream, and we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks.